you had tweeted out and posted out about a place you were at. You talked to me about that a little bit.
Sure, yeah, I was backstage last night at Forbidden Door for AEW. It was a wonderful experience. I appreciate them having me. Um, I it, Anyone who's followed my career knows that the locker room at AEW is a place that, interestingly enough, I'm extremely familiar with, even though I've never been in it. But everybody who was there, not everybody, I met some people for the first time last night. But between my time in Ring of Honor from 2015 to 2017, I'm actually wearing Jay Briscoe's shirt, who was
Yeah.
a good beacon of the transition between Ring of Honor and AEW itself. Because there's so many people who I didn't even, some who I did realize. I haven't seen Mark Briscoe in a long time. It was great to catch up with him. That was my first pay-per-view match in Ring of Honor back in 2015.
Okay.
So just so many familiar faces, but also people behind the scenes, because a lot of the production staff at AEW, which I didn't realize, it was transitioned over from Ring of Honor. So there was so many
Okay.
guys there that I haven't seen in, coming up on a decade now, it's just great to be able to catch up with all those people. But then the rosters themselves, I'd say probably 80% of them, I was familiar with. I got to see so many people that I haven't seen in a long time, and it was just awesome to catch up with all of them. So I really enjoyed myself, and I really had a good time.
Well, that's good to hear because you see a lot of people maybe after they leave WWE, everybody immediately is like AEW, AEW. And that's not always the case for everybody. But was that something kind of in the back of your mind once WWE kind of told you, okay, we're not going to pursue the contract? Were you kind of sort of looking that way, or are you just going to keep your options open for a while?
I mean, both. I was. It's not something that happened when WWE made their decision. It's something that has been on my mind for a long time, right? So
Yeah.
I'm I'm not in the WWE business. I'm in the professional wrestling business, right?
Yeah.
Even though I was with WWE for a long time, and I was thankful for all the things that they did for me, and I was thankful for all the opportunities that they gave me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've always had my eye on everything else outside the industry because, tons of my friends are there. Some of my close friends are there. Some of my close friends are in New Japan. One of my best friends is a New Japan IWGP Tag Team Champion. One of my other best friends is a GHC Tag Team Champion for Noah. I have friends. Some of my best close friends are in TNA. So right now, this is what happens when you're in the professional wrestling industry for 12 years. And I think people forget that because all they saw from me was just, I'm in this WWE system for a long time. And they saw that I was in the NXT system for more often than not. Right. When I was on
Yeah.
Raw, you couldn't really see my face and it was kind of a different character because of T-Bar and stuff. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of who I am and what I've done is lost on people because it wasn't like right there in their face. They weren't seeing me as who I am, which is Dijak and Donovan Dijak, like front and center on WWE pay-per-views or whatever. So it's kind of lost on them in a bit of a sense that how a lot of people might not understand how much crossover there is between different companies and different industries within my life and my professional journey. But there's a ton there. There's all sorts of crossover between all locker rooms. So I'm just happy now to be able to reconnect with a lot of those companies and people across all
Mm-hmm.
platforms. And right now I'm just enjoying the fact that I can kind of do and go wherever I want without having to worry about it for the first time in a long time. And worry about it is not, I never had like, I only mean from a contractual obligation standpoint. That's the only
Yeah.
the only worry that I ever really had.
Because I think a lot of fans who are kind of your WWE only fans, they don't really understand that, like, from wrestlers have talked about it, talked to a few people. a lot of y'all are like, y'all want everybody to do well. You don't want the other company, the competition that the fans have made up in their minds. You don't want the other guys to fail. You want them to do good because I mean, more wrestling is better for everybody, especially you guys, the talent.
Yeah, and people talk about that competition. I mean, the reality is there is competition there. There is. I mean, mostly from a business standpoint, right?
Yeah,
But I mean, even that being said, people are um, I guess protective of their own work is probably the best way to say it, right? Like if I'm in NXT or whatever, that means something to me. There's some people who it doesn't, right? There's some people who they do their own work and they worry about themselves and they don't care how the show performs or anything like that. And that's okay. You don't have to. There's no contractual obligation that you need to care how the show that you're on does. Some guys do care. I'm a guy who does care. I think it's vital and important that wherever I am feels like I'm part of that team, right? Like when in professional sports is the exact same way. If you're on the Boston Red Sox, there's some guys who go out there and they are invested in that and they say there's history here and I'm on the Red Sox and I don't like the Yankees and I need to win a championship for the Red Sox and I need to do this for my teammates and this is all important. And there's some guys who go, I'm just a baseball player. I'm going to go hit home runs because it makes me $1 million. I know professional baseball players. I know professional football players. There's guys in both camps, right? So it's very much similar in professional wrestling. I was a guy who was very protective of whatever team I was on because it was important to me. That being said, guys get traded between teams all the time and things like that happen. Wherever I am, I'm always going to be protective of who's around me and what I'm presenting because that becomes part of me and my brand. That's the way that it is. And I think fans tend to do that too, and that's okay. What's not okay is when it turns into a negative thing, right?
yeah,
When you start, and this happens in pro sports all the time, where you start bashing. But from that, it's the difference between professional sports and professional wrestling, right? Because there's obviously this crossover where it's scripted, so it becomes this
yeah,
mishmash of acting and pro athlete, and it confuses people, and then things start to feel real that aren't real, and it becomes this kind of nasty crossover. That happens a lot less within the realm of us as performers and entertainers, right? There's very little real animosity between. There's still some there if it does happen in whatever capacity, but for the most part, I don't think anyone as a wrestler takes that negativity in between rosters and companies as seriously as fans do, because at the end of the day, most of us know each other, or at the very least, we're friends, like good friends with someone who's friends with that other person. But it's part of it, so it's a little bit of everything.
yeah. What you said, you touch on what's real, what's not really real. A
Mhm.
lot of people really get sucked into it and they think anything that they're seeing, oh, he really hates that guy or that
Right,
girl really
exactly.
hates her. And it's
Yep.
like, most of the time, even if they dislike the person, they're going to work with them and make whatever work.
Right.
But you were at Forbidden Door backstage and everything,
Mhm.
kind of, visiting a lot of people.
Yep.
What's kind of the feel back there versus, where you just were at in WWE? Is there like a different feel backstage or?
Yeah, there is a different feel backstage. It's I'll preface this by saying last night was a pay-per-view, and it was a big pay-per-view, and it involved two different companies, that obviously work together, right, between AEW and
Yeah.
New Japan Pro Wrestling. So there was actually a lot of a lot of faces that I remember from like Ring of Honor crossover pay-per-views with New Japan. You know, there was a lot of guys that I was seeing there for the first time in 10 years. And there was guys within the production staff of New Japan that I was seeing for a long time. So there was a bit of crossover there. That being said, like I mentioned, it was a pay-per-view. Pay-per-views tend to be different than television in a pretty significant fashion. I wasn't on a lot of main roster pay-per-views, and the ones I was at were like Thunderdome based, but yeah, I was on a handful more just backstage in WWE on the main roster. Those tend to have a much different feel than television. So by definition, I've never been to AEW television, which I heard is a little more hectic, as live television always will be, right? Because I'm familiar with Monday Night Raw. I'm very familiar with Monday Night Raw. I know exactly what that scene is like. I've even been at a Monday Night Raw at that building that we were at last night, the UBS Arena on like Long Island. So I can compare those two. And from that standpoint, obviously Monday Night Raw is it's a zoo. It's chaos. You know, there's people running everywhere, running all over the place. You got to film this. You got to do that. There's stuff all over the place.
Yeah.
Last night was a little more laid back, right? There's not as much stuff because it's a different style of production. There's way less people because it's not TV, it's just pay-per-view. So I can't compare. It's comparing apples to oranges. But yeah, I would say that there's it felt less chaotic. Not to say that that's a bad thing. That's just the feel of it. And again, that's more than likely a pay-per-view thing as opposed to a company thing. But yeah, there wasn't a ton of people running around. There wasn't writers everywhere, with stacks of paper this big, which is what I experienced for the majority of my career. In terms of the main roster, which is the comparable scenario, right? Obviously, because NXT is a lot different between what I experienced mostly in NXT, which was local TV between Full Sail or the NXT Arena, the Performance Center, which was just always the same small building every week by week, or the takeovers in black and gold and the premium live events in the white and gold, where you're in the arena, but it's still this kind of condensed package of people. So yeah, I would say that the vibe last night was a lot closer to those takeover NXT arena shows, especially considering that a lot of the people there I was familiar with from those shows, right? There was a lot of crossover between black and gold, NXT, and AEW, even amongst production staff. There's some production staff in AEW who I used to work with in NXT. So the feel was similar to that, with a lot more experience, obviously, because a lot of the rosters got 10 years under their belt now. So it was just more of a professional feel, I guess we'll say, as opposed to like this feeling of young exuberance that we all had when we were in NXT.
Speaking of NXT, talking about the PLEs and stuff, say my wife and I went to Vengeance Day when y'all were in Clarksville, Tennessee.
Oh, cool, yeah.
Where you went against Joe Gacy in that crazy match.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then Stand and Deliver, that triple threat you had was obviously a banger. I've talked to a lot of people about that. I'm like, you just plug in Dijak wherever you need them, you're gonna have a good match. And like we've seen it over and over.
Yeah, and if I can touch on that for a little bit, and I'll interrupt you quickly because I know you have a follow-up question for that, and maybe it's this question.
No, you're perfectly fine.
The point you made was that you can plug me in anywhere and count on me to have a good match. That's exactly what you can do with me, and that's a double-edged sword, right? Which I learned quickly, maybe not quickly, but I learned over the course of time throughout my tenure in WWE. And it's something that I kind of knew already from Ring of Honor and the Independents as well. That's a gift and a curse. And I'll explain to you why. Because people get comfortable with that and they get used to it. Not just the fans, not just the viewers, but the bookers as well and the people who are in charge of decision making. So they know that. They know they can plug me anywhere and count on a good match. That has its detriments as well. right? Because it's good because it's a spot, it's a platform, it's all these opportunities.
Mhm.
But I've never gotten a full feeling of what I believe I'm capable of in terms of I'd like to be given the reins, right? Not
Mhm.
Roman reigns, but I'd like to be given a bigger opportunity to show that I can carry something that I can, and I don't just mean physically a title, although a title would be wonderful. I mean like carry a story, carry a brand, and like a big one, right? Like me and Ilya Dragunov had a great story,
Mhm.
but it wasn't the driving story behind the show at that time. It was a secondary story. I don't think there's been very, very little of my career where I've been the driving story behind the program at that time. Retribution was probably the closest when we debuted, and that was very short lived. Retribution never was on a pay per view. There were rumors that we were being built to have important pay per view storylines, but those got derailed quickly for whatever reason. So I've never, unless I'm missing something, I've never. Um, a short segment of Black and Gold. I was a little bit involved in the NXT Takeover War Games when I was part of Team
Yeah.
Ciampa against the Undisputed Era. That was probably the focal point for maybe 1 or 2 weeks of television. But again, I was one of 8 people involved in that, so it wasn't like a bunch of stuff was on my shoulders. That's what I've always wanted, and that's what WWE never gave me in any capacity that I can remember. And I always wanted that because I wanted to prove that I could do that. I wanted to prove that I could drive the show and drive ratings and be a main character, not a side character. So I think people always looked at me, and I think people still look at me and say, "Man, that guy's great, and you can plug him anywhere, and he'll have a great 5-star match, and it'll be amazing." It's a gift and a curse, because as everybody just found out, it doesn't have the job security that I thought it did. Right in my head, I said, "Okay, I'm a big guy, I'm in shape, I I check enough boxes where they'll always have me and they'll always have a job for me," and that wasn't the case. They used me and they said, "We've used you enough," and so
Yeah.
now I need to go somewhere else. So I'm not in a huge rush to jump into another situation that's similar to that. Right? I
Yeah.
I I, I need to end up somewhere where they can say, "Okay, hey, we'd like to use you in this capacity so you can prove yourself in that capacity." That's what I need in this point in my career, and that's what I'm actively seeking. So whether that's a company, whether that's me by myself doing independence and having that level of control to say I'd like to be in this situation and I'd like to be in this situation, we'll see. But I'm 37 years old now, so I can't just continuously sit back and say I'm going to be a great hand for the rest of my career, because that's got a short shelf life at this point.
Talking about your contract with WWE, what was that like? Was it just one-sided? Do you handle that directly? Do you have an agent, or how does that go about?
Yeah, so I do have an agent. It's the Paragon Talent Group, which is Mojo Rawley and Steve K. Um, they've worked tirelessly and endlessly by my side to support me. I brought them on about 6 or 7 months ago because historically, while I've been with WWE, there has been most of the time contracts got negotiated and renewed about a year out. So when you had about a year left on your contract. So once that year came and went, and then it started getting closer and closer, I said, "Okay, I think I need some representation at this point. There's probably going to be negotiations at any point." Um, and then the Endeavor thing happened, and it started getting tighter and tighter and tighter. Or I don't know the
Mhm.
timeline on the Endeavor thing, but anyway, the contract deadlines started getting tighter and tighter, not just for me, but for everybody, because apparently
Mhm.
that's just Endeavor's move. That's what they do. They just let contracts come down to the wire because it's a negotiating strategy or whatever business issue. I'm not going to judge their business decisions, right? Because they're all billionaires. So like, what do I know about making billions of dollars? So obviously it's the correct decision for them from a monetary standpoint. From a ethical standpoint, I think it's kind of lousy. I don't think it. But they're not in the business of ethics. They're in the business of making money. So I don't
Yeah.
blame them, right? But just from me, from a talent standpoint, I needed more communication from them, from the WWE office, from in terms of, because let's call a spade a spade. What happened is they kept pushing me off and pushing me off and pushing me off, and then without telling me or giving me enough warning, right? Because
Yeah.
let's be
So
honest,
was it like 2 weeks
two
before or
weeks
something?
ago, 2 weeks
Yeah.
ago, I thought I was planning this main roster run, and I was with WWE, and then whirlwind, and I have to rearrange my entire life within a matter of days, and I have to try
Mm.
to figure out booking dates, and that's not easy. These companies book
Yeah.
dates months out, right? This weekend right now is anything that I'm doing, right? Obviously, by definition, you're seeing something that just happened to fall into place, right? Like someone
Yeah.
unbooked themselves, or it's a promoter that I know personally and they needed help locally, like right away, or they're trying to squeeze me in and do me a favor. Like that's not good business, right? That doesn't help me. I'm trying to I'm trying to notify these companies like TNA and Ring of Honor, which had TNA and AEW, which had these shows this weekend. I'm like, hey, by the way, like I am available to be used as a free agent. If you have a spot on your television show that is airing in 2 days, right? You can't just rewrite television in 2 days. You can try, but that's difficult.
Yeah.
That's a big
You're just like,
$1 million process.
by the way, guys, if
I
you
mean,
get,
yeah. If Tony wanted to use me on Forbidden Door last night, obviously I would have been
you'd be
happy
like,
to do that in a free agent status. You can't just. It's a difficult process to just plug someone right in and be like, now
yeah,
we got to change TV. Now we got to write out. That's a big process. That's hard to do with. For example, August and September and October have been a lot easier and more full for me because it's people that you can make plans and you can work around it. But I'm making do. WWE didn't legally owe me any explanation beyond what I was given, and quite frankly, it's on me for uh, bringing elements of trust into a business relationship, right? So if I trust this person that they're gonna, because they don't have to do anything that they say, right? They can tell me something and not do it. That's not illegal. It's just it's difficult for me from a business standpoint. Nothing that was done was illegal as far as I know. It just made my life difficult, and a lot of that is on me for not treating it uh, because I knew when my contract was up, and I could have just played it as if this was going to happen. I could have planned much better in advance, and to a certain extent, right? Like you can't negotiate contracts between companies and stuff, but I could have contacted more bookers and stuff. But it's hard when you say, yes, I'm under contract, but I might not be, so can you half book me on these shows? So it becomes this balancing act. But like I could have done a more proactive job. That being said, I think WWE on their part um, could have communicated better. They didn't owe that to me. They don't have to do that by any business practice or standard, but I don't think it would have hurt them in any capacity either, other than they need to safeguard themselves from wrestlers overreacting or whatever thing. I don't know what the thought process is, but I'm sure there is one, even if I don't agree with it.
So did they let you know you were going to be drafted to Raw, or was that just like a y'all? How does that work? Like, did they tell y'all ahead of time, or
I heard rumblings. I've been in WWE long enough where I know enough people who are part of meetings and things like that. Again, even if you're in a meeting, something can change because it's usually just one or two people ultimately making the final decisions. So very rarely do you get information like, "Hey, this is definitely happening," because that's not how it works, right? Things can change last second, whatever. But I heard that there's a decent chance that you'll be drafted on Raw, and so I said, okay, great. I hope I'm the number one draft pick, but if not, I hope I'm on TV because I know how the draft works. I've been a supplemental draft pick before. It's not good. It's not a good sign. At this point, the supplemental draft has become comical, And if I'll warn other WWE superstars, if you end up in the supplemental draft in any capacity, I would start strongly safeguarding your career and worrying about what's next in your career, because I haven't seen a lot of that work out very well. That's just being completely honest, just being completely transparent. So that part of it for me was a shoot, and they brought us all to the performance center, and we were all watching it on the screen. So as I'm watching some of my friends get drafted and stuff, I'm very happy for them, but I'm trying to stay in character and be this kind of angry, grumpy cop thing or whatever I was doing. But also at the same time, I'm processing in my head, like, okay, this window's closing, this window's closing, this window's closing. And then when the last draft pick was announced, I started saying to myself, okay, I hope they were wrong, and I hope I'm still on NXT, because I can still make something work out of that. I've been told at this point that I'm likely going to be entering a program with Trick Williams for the NXT Championship. So I'm like, great. All of this that's fine. We'll just go that direction. And then even though I have a contract coming up, we'll try to work on it from a standpoint. You know, I'm in NXT at that point, so they probably don't want to renew a main roster contract. So maybe they'll give me a 1-year extension. I can finish up at NXT and then figure out the transition to Raw. Whatever is going through my mind. And then I hear them announce that there's one more draft pick. You know, we have one more draft, and I know that TV has ended. I know that this is the supplemental draft, and they're just gathering content for, you know, YouTube or whatever at this point. So in my head and on my phone, because I'm talking to my wife, I'm talking to my friends, and I'm letting them know, I'm like, this is a bad sign. This is not a good thing. I need to now pretend for the cameras that I'm happy and I'm excited, which in a certain sense I was, right, because all my friends are cheering for me. The crowd pops huge for me because I've become a commodity in NXT, right? I was just entering probably the hottest run of my career in NXT, because if you watch the match with me and Noam Dar, the crowd is super behind me. I was one of the top 3 most over guys on that show, behind, I don't know, maybe Trick Williams and somebody else. I don't know, but I was very over at that point, especially with that crowd. So everybody's super happy for me, but in the back of my mind, I'm saying this isn't a good thing. This is a bad sign. Just from a business standpoint and from a professional standpoint, it's not. It doesn't feel how it should. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to give them a chance. I'm going to put my best foot forward. I'm going to do everything that I should. I went to Monday Night Raw, which was in Connecticut, so it's in New England. It's in an area that the crowd's going to be familiar with me. Okay, good start. The King of the Ring tournament is starting. You can just plug and play me in there. I can get in front. And then when I wasn't in the King of the Ring tournament, and they're like, we want you on Raw, but we don't have anything right now. That was maybe one of the bigger red flags where I'm like, oh, this, I don't think that there's a plan here. And I'm not sure that, and with my contract coming up, that's a bad sign. And lots of people were trying to stay positive and reassure me. They're like, oh, they wouldn't have done this. They wouldn't have done that. They wouldn't have called you up. They didn't have to do that. They don't have to tell you the things that they're telling you. And in the back of my mind, I was saying, yeah, I've experienced things like this before in WWE, and I feel like I know where this is trending. And then I had a talk with my writer, and it was positive, and we got some pitches ready. And then those never made their way up the chain of command. And then he texted me and told me I was on main event, and I was like, this is another big red flag. This is a bad sign. And then I was on Speed a couple weeks later. I'm like, this is another red flag. This is another bad sign. And all the while, I kept being reassured by everybody. This is just a negotiating tactic. This is just this. This is just that. But in the back of my head, I kept saying, I think I know where this is going. I think I know where this is going. And quite frankly, it's on me, because I should have trusted my instinct and planned better, but I didn't.
So you said they didn't have nothing for you with King of the Ring. So that whole time after you're drafted, you know, you're showing up to Monday Night Raw or, you know, wherever it's at.
For the most part, I think there was one Monday Night Raw where I wasn't flown in. But yeah, for the most part, I was showing up there and either hanging out backstage and doing nothing, or I was on main event or WWE Speed the last week.
And so basically they were just like, we don't have any creative for you. Were they saying, hey, we got something in the works, or were they just like, look, we don't have it?
Yeah, I wasn't told like nobody said like we have something in the works, but I was told that like they wanted to do something and they wanted to use me. That was told to me, which in hindsight probably not true. I mean, I guess there's the possibility that they wanted to use me, but I don't know. At the end of the day, if you wanted to use me, it's not hard. It's a show that you write, and you know that
Yeah.
you can put me. They've done this, right? There's scenes backstage where they're filming something and someone just meanders through the background. So if you wanted me, I was there. You could have just stood me in the background. People would be like, "Oh, there he is. He's in the background." They're
Oh
trying
yeah.
something. At the end of the day, they didn't try anything. You could have tried something and you didn't. So to me, that feels active. That feels like you're actively not trying. And I feel like the decision had already been made up, and I was being told something that wasn't on the level. That's my thought process. I don't see any flaws in my thought process. I guess it's within the realm of plausibility that they did have there was some sort of vision where it's like we'll do this with him and we'll do this with him, and then some plans changed and it got adjusted so that that no longer fit, and then they had a meeting where they tried to circle back and they said let's just get rid of him because it doesn't work. I guess that's possible. It doesn't seem likely to me. I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that they just didn't have anything, or maybe they were, they
It
just didn't go through with it.
it seems crazy, but what seems less crazy is that their minds were already made up,
Mm.
because that seems plausible to me. It seems the most likely scenario in my brain is that, and I mentioned this on the Fightful podcast. The most likely scenario in my brain is that the regime changed. They saw that they had T-Bar on the roster. They knew who I am as a worker and stuff, and they said, "Okay, he has a main roster contract. Do we want to just release him right now and give him 90 days and save some money with everybody else?" By everybody else, I mean because there was cuts around that time,
Mm.
so they could have lumped me in with that. Or do we let him finish out this contract in NXT and just get the most out of the money that we're spending? And I think that was the decision that was made, which does let me know that there was, if that's the case and that was true, then I was lied to at least two or three times, because I was not told that I was finishing out my contract in NXT. I was told I'd do 6 months in NXT and then I'd come back and I'd have a main roster run, and obviously none of that happened. And so if what I think was true, then yeah, then no matter what I did in NXT, I didn't have a chance, and they weren't going to give me a fair shot. Do I
It-
am I angry about that? No, because I got I mean, yes, I'm frustrated about that, but it's again one of those double-edged swords, right? Because that includes a huge career rebuilding run for me as Dijak on NXT, which has a ton of TV time. I was on a ton of premium live events. Sean took care of me about as much as he could in terms of character presentation, and I'm super thankful for that. And I'm having a much uh, better transition now than I would have if that wasn't given to me back when I was T-Bar. If they just released me then, I'd be struggling big time. So again, it's another one of those double-edged swords where I'm thankful but disappointed, which is exactly what I said in my letter. Everything is thankful but disappointed. You can be both. We're human beings, right? You can love and hate your spouse all at the same time. That's just who we are as people.
So when you got drafted to Raw, and then you talked about they didn't really have a whole lot going for you, was there anybody that was on Raw that you were like kind of pitching, hey, let me work with this guy, or let me work with this group, or was there any kind of plans that you were kind of trying to get in motion?
Yes. Yeah. I made lots of pitches. Um, and maybe part of it's on me for not pitching them directly to Hunter. Um, because I could have, right? It was so early in my run in this main roster run that I didn't want to. I didn't want to be too overbearing, right? Because I got drafted, and it's like everybody else who gets drafted. I can't say with 100% certainty, even though I know these people and stuff. But I'm guessing that most of the people who are drafted, like on the TV draft, and they've been on TV right away, I'm guessing that they didn't have to like think up a bunch of creative and pitch it, and creative was like, I think creative just had a plan for them and said, here's what you're doing this week. Here's what you're doing this week. Here's what you're doing this week. That obviously wasn't the case with me. So my week came and went, and I said, okay, they didn't think of anything for me. Maybe I should start being proactive and think of something for myself. So I did. I drafted up 4 pitches with my writer. We fleshed all of them out. We wrote all of them out. I don't know how much he knew. I don't know how much my writer knew. Probably not much. I don't think they let the writers in on, what the actual plan is, and what the office business portion of it is. I think he probably just thought, let's draft up some stuff from Raw, and I'll mention it to whoever, and they'll either use it or they won't. And all of that probably happened, and it probably just kind of got ignored. Most of the things we drafted were like me and introducing me with Adam Pearce as something to help him out with dealing with Braun Breaker, because me and Braun have history. There was another thing we drafted up for including me in the Final Testament in some capacity. Again, it's funny. It's funny when you hear the word pitch, right? Like if someone grabs a quote from this and says, "Oh, Dijak pitched to be in the Final Testament," then the fans will see that and they'll read that and be like, "Oh, he walked." Or I don't even know what gets pictured. I think they picture like everybody sitting in this room, like this war room, like drafting out Raw, and then like all the important figureheads of WWE like just sit down and they're like, should we put Dijak on Raw with Braun Breaker? And they're like thinking about it. And I don't think it's that serious. I think
where's the yays and the nays? Who's
right,
for it?
right, exactly. I don't think it's that. I don't think it ever gets to that level. I think I wrote up some stuff with my writer. We printed out a Word document, and then it got handed to Bruce Pritchard maybe, and he looked at it and said, nah, probably not. if that, it might not even have ever come up. He might not have. If what I think was true, he probably didn't even look at it, because he said, "Oh, we're just going to release him in 2 weeks," or whatever the thought process was at that point. That's probably more likely. And the same thing goes for if I had texted it straight to Hunter and been like, "This is my idea. This is my." He might have just looked at that and said, "Oh, yeah, why would I bother reading this? The plan is to let his contract run out, right?" I don't know. I'm guessing, but I don't know. That being said, at that point, no, I wasn't pitching things directly to Hunter, because we were still in kind of this honeymoon phase where I'd only been on Raw for about a month at that point. So I didn't want to just bombard them with like, here's my idea. So they can be like, this guy's super annoying. Like, let's get rid of him. Yeah. So it's this balancing game where plus people were telling me, I was hearing through the grapevine, like, oh, they have a plan for you. They want you on Raw. So I was like, okay, I'm going to let, as the kids say, I'm going to let them cook. I'm going to let them, I'm going to let them come up with their own ideas, right? Because if it's their idea, then they're going to be more invested in it rather than if it's my idea. If it's my idea, they're like, oh, we'll see if his idea works. If it's their own idea, it's a show that they write. So you can make it work, right? If it's your idea, you can make it work. Even if the fans don't respond the way that you want it to, you can double down and make them feel a certain way. It's not terribly hard. So yeah.
So you talked about that you texted, or that you could text Triple H. I mean, how accessible is he to most of the talent? Like, is it fairly easy to get a hold of him and talk to him, or you got to go through some channels? Or because you said you just texted it, you could text him directly, but I mean,
yeah, it for me anyway. It was easier than Vince. Vince was impossible to get a hold of. I didn't have Vince's number. I'd have to stand outside Vince's door in a huge line, just trying to wait for 10 minutes if he happened to have 10 minutes free after they had rehearsed everything on Raw before he had to go out and produce it. But I did that. I did that plenty of times. I talked to Vince plenty of times, and I would draft things, and I'd hand him binders, and I would try stuff. None of that worked, obviously. Hunter, the only reason I had Hunter's number was because we worked in a more tight-knit capacity on NXT Black and Gold. So, you know, there was a little more communication in that aspect, and you know, I would never bomb Hunter's phone with like text messages, because I know that he's super busy. I know he's got to deal with 500 different things all at once. So I didn't want to be the guy just blowing up his phone with ideas and thoughts and whatever. So in my life, I probably texted him maybe 6 or 7 times, including like, hey, I heard you had a really big health scare. I hope that you're okay. We're all rooting for, you know, text messages like that are included. But then just maybe like once a year, I would follow up. Like I remember right after Vengeance Day, not the one you went to, but the one with Wes Lee, because you got to remember, they told me 6 months. They said, we're going to send you down to NXT for 6 months, and then you'll be back up on the main roster, and we'll get you going from there. So at that point, I was coming up on 6 months, and I'd had this really good run already in NXT where I had reinvented myself. I had this great match with Wes. Everything was clicking. Everything was firing on all cylinders. You could have easily taken that product and transplanted it right onto Monday Night Raw. That would not have been a difficult transition. I would message him and say, you know, thank you for this opportunity. I think this accomplished exactly what we needed. I think this was the reinvention that I needed. You saved my career. I'm ready to run through a wall for you whenever you need. And, you know, he would text me back and say, you know, that's awesome. You're killing it. Keep up the good work. But that was most of what it was. There was never like a fluid discord between the two of us or anything like that, which maybe is my fault. Maybe I should have been better. Maybe I should have called him once a month to have a conversation. I don't know. I'm the first to admit that I'm not very good at the political aspect of this business. I'm not fantastic at being everybody's best friend. I think the locker room genuinely, I think we all get along and we're all boys. Especially if you're around me for a long time, I think everybody, we all tend to get along really well. I don't think I rub anybody, because there are guys who are super abrasive in the locker room, and everybody knows that, and you kind of keep your distance. I'm not one of those guys. I'm a very friendly person. I think I err on the side of I don't want to be an annoyance, and I think sometimes in certain aspects that can be detrimental, because the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and that's just kind of
that's
how
what
it
popped
is.
in my head. You said that. I was thinking about that.
Yeah. So yeah, but it's like everything I know this is the theme of the show, but everything is a double-edged sword, right? Because the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? But if you're squeaking and grinding and you're annoying and you're broken, you get released. And I've seen that a million times, right? So I've seen you can be too squeaky and you don't get any grease, you get fired. So
I want to ask you about it because I mean, I know everybody, a lot of what we've talked about is, you know, WWE and the contract stuff, and that's pretty much what a lot of people are going to want to talk to you about, and it makes sense. That's like the big headline right now.
sure.
But I was want to talk about something that some people started digging up lately. Somebody had posted a picture of you playing college basketball not that long ago,
Yeah.
and people were like, "Oh my God, Dijak was in it." And I think I saw you had responded to somebody. You're like, "You're surprised?" I'm like 6'7". Surely and I did some digging and saw that you played basketball and football at Bridgewater State. You were like all-American for them and all these kind of records and stuff. So was the NBA or NFL kind of the original goal before wrestling?
NBA when I was like too young to realize that I did not have what it took to be in the NBA. And then maybe around 16 or 17, NFL seemed more realistic. And in hindsight, the NFL, just because now I know my best friend was in the NFL, another guy that I wrestled with was in the NFL, so I know that it's not one of those things. Like at the time, if you said I want to be in the NFL, especially in the town I came from and things like that, that was unrealistic. It wasn't unrealistic. I just didn't have the correct mind frame and expectations to be able to get there. My best shot at being in the NFL would have been being an offensive lineman. I have the build just like like Baron Corbin was in the NFL as an offensive lineman. My best friend Brendan Williams, who's Dio Madden now, Mason Madden was in the NFL as an offensive lineman. I easily could have been an offensive lineman in the NFL. I went to a Division I school, the University of Massachusetts. They moved me to the offensive line. If I had stayed there, I likely would have had a decent shot in being in the NFL. It just wasn't for me. So yeah, long story short, I probably could have had a maybe 2 or 3 years in the NFL. I decided that wasn't quite for me. So I transferred to a smaller school, like you said, Bridgewater State, which is still in Massachusetts. And I played football and basketball there, and I had the time of my life. I knew it wasn't ending in a professional career, but I was able to play and have fun with my friends and end my sports career the way that I wanted it to end. So it was a lot of fun.
So how'd that transition into wrestling? Like, were you always a fan, or was it?
I was a fan as a kid, and then when sports took over from 2003 until 2010, I stopped watching, and I was not, because I just didn't have time. I was at basketball practice or football practice or whatever it happened to be. But then once I was done with all that and all that was out of my life, now I had time for professional wrestling again. So I became a fan again. And that's kind of when it broke down. And I found the New England Pro Wrestling Academy, which was just announced that I'm going to be an exclusive trainer at the New England Pro Wrestling Academy. So if you're in Massachusetts, you can come, or if you're in the Massachusetts area, you can come train with me now on Wednesday nights. So I'm super excited about that. But that's where I trained for the whole beginning of my career 10, 12 years ago. And the transition was seamless because I love performing, I love acting, I love all those things, but I also love physicality and sports. So it was a great merger of the two and a combination, and I turned a dream into a reality. I'm very happy about it.
Well, it definitely, that seems what it happens, like basketball, football players, anybody who's athletic, if they're willing to put in the work, it's like almost a seamless transition, especially if they got that natural charisma and stuff that really works too. Well, let me just do one final thing I want to ask you before I let you go. Okay. The whole ratio thing, was that just like a one-off that you started, or like, because like obviously it's like been your signature now, like online. Like, was you just let me just do this?
It started, I just tried to, I thought it would be funny to ratio the post that NXT made about me having the underground match with Eddie Thorpe, because they do these secondary posts where they don't get much traction interaction. So I was like, I'm just going to try to raise the views on this however I can. And it worked. And I was like, oh shit, that's kind of funny. And then I tried it again. And it just kind of snowballed from there. So now it's just kind of like a funny side gag that I do to kind of pop myself, because at the end of the day, Twitter doesn't matter and nobody really cares about it. So I try to get the most out of it that I can in terms of being a silly goose.
And you've been targeting a certain streamer lately too. Yeah. Is there some is there a fight in the works there, or what's going on?
There can be now. Yeah. At the time,
yeah, I would say that.
I don't think I've spoken to him since the departure from WWE happened. But yeah, I guess we can like have a full match now, where I can do whatever I want. But I think he's been keeping his distance because he probably knows that's a possibility. So yeah, maybe I'll hit him up.
Well, I appreciate you, Dijak, taking time out of your day to talk to me. I'll let you go. I wish you the best. All the stuff. I'm gonna do my best. If you get a date somewhere kind of near me. I'm in Tennessee. Not a whole lot happens where I'm at right now. But if you ever have a date anywhere around me, I'm definitely gonna try to see you there.
All right, sounds good. Thank you very much.